I had nothing to lose really when it came down to like starting fashion design. At the time, I was like 37 years old, and I treated it really as a giant adventure. I didn't feel like I had much to lose. Like, even if the entire thing was a very public failure, it wouldn't change how I felt about myself. It wouldn't change my life 1 second. So I just treated it like a big adventure. I started from scratch. I didn't know anyone or anything about fashion beyond buying clothes to wear. So I basically went on Google and found everything. I found a pattern maker. I found a local factory, trolling Reddit, YouTube, just learning things from scratch. And it's wonderful now that you can kind of have self-directed learning about how to start in fashion. So I just started from scratch, and anyone can do that. You can do that today if you wanted to. I mean, it's still debatable whether that's a good thing to completely have that self-directed Google-based learning. I think it's reflected in the stuff that I do. Like all of the things like this jacket, right? All these things are based on things that have a very public record and have like an enthusiast community that have put designs, pictures, histories, things to learn on the internet. And a lot of my designs are iterative. They're based on that. What does that look like in 2024? But, that means I don't have a lot of technical skill. I don't know how to draft a pattern. I don't know how to grade a pattern. I work with people who know how to do that. So you need to surround yourself with other technical skills, talent. I think fashion school covers all of those technical aspects. I'm kind of more in the idea creative space. Like when we first started, it was Queensland Football Club. So I was doing a lot of like 90s based sportswear, which was popular at the time as well, coincidentally. And a lot of the things that I was designing were kind of based out of necessity, utility, because all the stuff that we could make locally were 90s based sportswear because we had machines from the 90s because our industry is almost dead. So all the factories and know-how and designs were from the 90s, not as a design choice, but because that's what we could work with locally. That determined the early creative direction was necessity. So I can tell you like the framework of how people should start a business, not necessarily how I did it. This is what people pay me like $1,000 for basically. It's the framework for how to start a business without big problems. The first thing is like who are you making for? And you have to understand your customer, your ideal customer, and what problem do they want solved. Like I want to look hot and trendy for summer. I want to look great when I'm playing golf. I want something that's a really good rain jacket, whatever. And then what product that you're developing will solve it. And then you take the idea, which is hot at golf, into a product, which is an interesting polo at golf. I don't know. This is like, I'm mangling the example, but just go with me. And then you decide, okay, so this is how much I want to spend, how much I want to retail it for. So hot golf polo goes for 100 Australian dollars, let's just say. So that's kind of your first line. And that is what most people have in their head when they come talk to me. And the second line is, okay, how are we going to make this a reality? So $100 golf polo, you have to decide how much you take home, what your profit margin is. And that, could be 60%, 70%, could be 50%. It really depends on what you're comfortable wearing as a business. And if you go down to something that's closer to 50, 40%, a low profit margin, then you have to develop lots of things. Your model has to be dealing with volume, bulk. If your profit margin is high, then you are comfortable with smaller quantities because both roads lead to the same amount of profit or amount of money in your bank. So you have to decide which arm to go down. But once you decide on a profit margin, that means that your $100 golf polo now has a target price in terms of how much you make it for. So if I have a 60% profit margin, I make the golf polo for $40. Done, all printed, packed in my warehouse or whatever. So out of $40 is your make price. So out of the $40, then you have a plan as to how much do I spend on fabric? How much do I spend on the make of it? How much do I spend on the marketing budget of it? And then you have to make a decision about what type of product you're making. Your hot golf polo, the idea of hotness could be mostly in the marketing. So you have basically cheap fabric, but you get a sexy person to model for you. The idea dictates the plan. Or you could say that, I really want a good fitting, good quality polo, and the product will speak for itself. So not much in the way of marketing. It's up to you. You choose your own adventure. It just goes to show that your core idea needs to be strong and very specific so that it can flow onto all these technical decisions. So You've decided how much the make is, you've decided how much the fabric is, you've decided how much the marketing budget is, and then you can make those decisions as to when you speak to a fabric supplier, you know what your budget is. When you speak to a factory, you know what the manufacturing price is because you have allocated a budget. So just in your head, on day one, day zero, your big idea about a sexy golf polo has given you a business plan, has given you actual numbers, actual figures that you can go out in the world and talk to people with. And that's what people pay me money for, and I'm giving you for free because I'm not very interested in talking to hot polo guys anymore, really. I think that's a very good question. How much money do I need to start a fashion business? If you have no idea what you're doing, which is most people, I would recommend spending no money, zero money, or taking pre-orders or something like that, because your first season, first 2 years are going to be full of mistakes and things that are not ideal that you will iterate on. Your first releases will be shit, basically, like mine were. So well, you want to de-risk that. Basically, when you start a business, you're not trying to make money. You're paying for an education in the fashion business. And when you finally graduate 2 years later, then you can start making money. I started with $1,100. And what I did is I bought blanks that I then printed logos on. And that gave me kind of an in to understanding supply chain stuff, where to buy hoodies, what is a good hoodie, screen printing, shipping. It just got my foot in the door. With that $1,000, we sold out. And all that money we kind of reinvest into the business. Like I still, 2.5 years later, I haven't taken a cent from the business. If you start with a lot of money, you could definitely spend it, right? You can hire someone to design for you. You can hire someone to manage the business from you on day one. But the problem is that you have no idea what you're doing. That money disappears very quickly because you have no idea what your strongest point of your business is. Is it the fabric? Is it the product making? Is it the marketing? If you're inexperienced, you'll end up leaking money all over the place, and with the return having no idea about what to reinvest it in. This is how I would start a business with no money. I think that's an attractive prospect. What I would do is I would just build in public. I would take things that take no money whatsoever. I would film on my smartphone and I would project my ideas of clothing. Like, what about I make this? What about I make that? And you kind of experiment in the idea space and just see what gets traction that you are really into, that you're really passionate about, and there is a customer base that is really passionate about that too, right? And you can do that on social media. You can just take a look at view counts and engagement and figure out what the center of that Venn diagram is. And being completely transparent, going like, look, I don't really know what I'm doing, but I can offer this for really cheap price because this is my first release. And you're taking a risk on me, but I want to reward that by making no money on it, and we can get going. That's what I would have done had I started. And that's basically how I did start. Should you start with a collection? You should start with, I think, my personal opinion is that you start with one thing, just one thing to build your entire brand universe, mainly for two reasons. The first thing is that it's very hard to do anything well. And if you concentrate your funds, your attention on one thing done well, that separates yourself from the pack, that is the most economical way to start. And I don't mean economical in terms of money. It's like in terms of your attention, in terms of your brain power. If you just do one thing well, that's a great start. I wouldn't start with 5-10 different things because it is too expensive, too hard. And when you first start out, you don't know what you're doing. And then 10 things mean you're going in 10 different directions. Just keep it small. I think the economics dictate that e-commerce is the way to go now, without a doubt. You could have a store this afternoon, with a domain, a beautiful website, and you can take pre-orders today, now. Just imagine it was in the 90s or the early 2000s. To get to that point, you would need years of building a reputation, of saving enough money to get a lease, to sign a lease that's 3 to 5 years, in a contract. Right now, the barrier to entry is nothing. The first Shopify, monthly fees $5 or something. It's crazy. But it just means that you've got a lot of competition as well. So you do invite other problems. But there's no doubt that e-commerce is the way to go. It doesn't guarantee quality though, that's for sure. At first it was a lot of it was imitation. A lot of it was seeing what I liked out in the world and trying to do my own version of it, my own spin on it. And as the skill set has grown, and as I've found, people to help me, like pattern makers, good factories, my confidence has grown so I can tackle more complex things. So nowadays, I don't design for, I need to make a workwear jacket. I kind of I'm more in the idea space. Like, I want to express some idea about work in 2024. I want to express some idea about being young in summer, and take very abstract thoughts that don't really belong as objects and try and turn that into a jacket, try to turn that into a shirt. So it's way more fun now, but in the early stages, a lot of it was like, I see a jacket, how do I make it? How do I copy it? And then in copying it, figure out how things are made. Research and figuring out how things have, particularly in menswear, I'm not like inventing new shapes. I'm not inventing new fabrics. All of that is iterative. All your designs are kind of based on what came before. And the only way to find out what came before is to research and study and learn stuff. And that right now is like the best moment for that. Everything's on the internet. Even if it's in a book, you can find the book. You can find an obscure Japanese, French, Italian book on the internet. I've got a library now full of stuff that I can't read because I don't know the language, but I'm able to find these books, find these pictures, find these archives because of the internet. It's amazing. Okay, so when you read books, for me, it comes under like 3 broad categories, right? The first category is like literally history of garment. So you look at, like, this is Avant. They do like these little book magazines. So he's based in France, and I got to know him a little bit online, and he does these amazing kind of articles about vintage workwear. So that's more like reference books, seeing what came before. I find that really interesting when it comes to like thinking or concepting ideas and designs. Then there's like pure history books, like purely about the history of, certain fashion movements. Like this is Take Ivy, and this is kind of a very famous book in Japan. This is translated from the original Japanese. This is about prep and that prep movement that happened in the 1960s in Japan, where they sort of adopted a lot of prep fashion from America. And just as a history book, it's really interesting to see how different countries adopt different fashion movements. I didn't really take a lot in terms of fashion design, but the ideas behind it are pretty interesting. And then you have like technical knowledge, like technical manuals. So this was introduced by my friend Jeremy Smith online. This is the Entrepreneur's Guide to Sewn Product Manufacturing. And this is kind of a real technical manual about how garments are graded, how it goes into like more industrial product knowledge. It goes into sewing theory. It goes into how do you cost a product. It's kind of invaluable in terms of running a fashion business. It's not very inspiring, but it does help you get the job done. It helps businesses stay in business. So it's 2024 when this video is being made. It feels like a hostage video. It's 2024. You just got to get your hands dirty and plow through the internet, as much free content that's up on the internet. So that means like niche enthusiast forums on Reddit can be a very good resource, because those guys are like, they don't have lives. They are into it at a level that you and I could never be. And you need to like use their knowledge. YouTube is an incredible free resource. Like if you had no money, there's no better time in the world, the history of the world, to learn stuff than right now. For me, a lot of it was talking to people who are left in our industry still, like our pattern makers, the people in our factory, and spending a lot of face-to-face time trying to learn about stuff. I've learned so much about garment dyeing because I spent a lot of time with one of the 2 garment dyers left in Victoria, in Melbourne, and they shut like 6 months later. I learned so much about garment dyeing. Like this right now is garment dyed. When you're running a fashion business, you're always in this cycle of learning, developing, iterating. What that means is you're never very secure in your ability. You're not very secure in your delivery. So you're always in these peaks and troughs. Right now, we've just released some jackets, and I'm very excited for the next version of these jackets. I think the main struggle is that you're always living in the future. Right now, you release some jackets, but that was stuff that you had worked on a year ago, 6 months ago. And you've shepherded that through manufacturing and product development, and now it's finally released. But your mind, your head is in 12 months in the future, where you've done a better version of that product, or you've done something that is more in line with your tastes, creative vision, something that's more technically complex that you are really into. So you're always like not living in the current moment. You're always kind of folding in time. That I think is a struggle. But I think it made me realize how fake jobs are in a way, because you define yourself, like I've been a doctor for 16 years, right? And you wear that so often and for such a long time that the stereotypes of this doctor stuff kind of bleeds into you, and you kind of feel like, oh yeah, I'm a, responsible member of public. I'm kind of dedicated. I'm intelligent. And all this stuff that people believe about you kind of seeps into how you believe about yourself, right? And until you drastically change your career or drastically change how you see yourself, you don't realize that a lot of that stuff is not necessarily true or real or everlasting. I never thought of myself as creative. I never thought of myself as being like a public person that communicates to millions of people. That seems bizarre to me. But as soon as you kind of take on that mantle, then, the other attributes of another profession start to bleed into you as well. And all of this stuff is just framing, right? It's all just like fake, I think. You really do write the story of your own life by yourself. I hate marketing. That's very ironic for me to say because my business, it survives based on marketing. But I kind of hate it as a word because there are certain connotations about it, right? Like, is this product good or is it just marketing? It just seems like in opposition to authenticity and reality that someone can just jump in and make something seem cool when it isn't. I approach marketing to be like, this is cool. How do I let people know that it is cool, right? How do I present it genuinely that more people should know about this? That's how I view marketing. There is no better time in the history of the world to do that because you don't need to hire an agency, an influencer, some sort of gatekeeper that you need to pay money for to reach people who are interested. Right now, we've got these social media channels and algorithms that all these interested people are out there, and you just have to put your stuff out there often enough that it'll be picked up by unseen, godly forces of the algorithm. But it's free, so that's encouraging, isn't it? You just need to present yourself often enough so that people can find you. And I think it's cringe or I think it's embarrassing to put your face to the world and go look, I don't know what I'm doing, but isn't this cool? And it's a very vulnerable place to be in. But life's short, you will die soon. No one will remember you. I think it's time you have a little bit of fun and realize your dreams. I think when it comes to branding, people think of branding as very important. Oh, this is my logo. These are my color schemes. This is the ethos of my brand. I think that's really a waste of money. Definitely a waste of money, actually. Because in your first season, your first 2 seasons, the first 5 seasons, you have no idea what you stand for. You haven't really understood the fit between what you want to do and what your customer wants to buy yet. It's all very nebulous. So whilst branding is very important and there are agencies out there who are willing to take your money to optimize your branding, unless the idea in your head is rock solid, crystal clear, and you have a track record of selling to people, don't waste your money on that. Your money should be going into exploring what you want to do, what people want to buy. You spending more money on, 5 failed experiments in terms of designs is way better than finding a logo by a very famous designer that you won't use into your second season because your business is dead. You know what I'm saying? So there's a time and place for those things. Someone from LVMH will spend $10 million on a logo and that's probably well spent. But for you, I wouldn't be worried about the salad dressing if you don't have the salad, I'm going to say things that are completely unrelatable right now, I think. Depends on what your goals are, right? If you want to learn as much as you can within a finite period of time, you have to really throw yourself into it completely, obsessively. Every spare hour should be reading something, learning something. I'm 3 years into it, but the amount of time that I've spent reading, iterating with my mind on the business, could be similar to what people have done in 10 years or 5 years because I've just completely thrown myself into it. It could be debated that the other parts of my life are in complete disarray and I'm kind of a work-life mess. You could debate that, but that's not what the question is, right? The question is, how much time should you spend on it? And my answer is all of the time. That's my answer. Completely unrelatable, not very healthy, but that's my personal answer. Yeah, it's very difficult, right? You have to know yourself in terms of whether you want to work alone or work with a partner or work for someone. And it also really has to go with your stage of life as well. I'm old, right? I'm kind of knocking on the door of 40 and probably will die soon of natural causes. I'm on a timeline here. I just feel like the quickest way, I'm impatient, the quickest way for me to realize the things I want to do is to do it myself and not ask for permission or ask for someone or wait around for someone to teach me or let me do something. For me, it's just to do it, and it's to figure out how do I do it. But that's me at 39, right? For me at 21 would be a different answer. I would be very interested in trying to work for a company and trying to learn that way and to spend someone else's money on funding my education and getting paid at the same time. Like that would be my interest then. So I think it depends on where you are in life, I think. How do I manage cash flow between releases? Such an issue for emerging brands. That, yeah, a very crucial part of the business is managing cash flow. And that is to say that you have these ongoing expenses. Although you may see on the surface like a very successful business, very popular online, lots of money coming in. But when you're trying to fund, like when you've got employees that help you, when you've got rent to pay on retail shops, on offices, and when you have very expensive product development, like you're paying for clothes 6 months in advance, 8 months in advance, and not just like the sampling and the testing, but it's also like literally we are paying stuff for May next year. We are paying stuff for September next year right now. And we might not get into September if the next 2 drops don't sell. You're always having to live in the future and pay for the future. And that's continually stressful. And if you get the mathematics wrong, if your release in the future is too small, then your company doesn't grow at the rate that you want it to. So you're always gambling. And it's something that I want to live in this world of abstract ideas and fabric and what's going to be interesting to me. I don't want to be living in the Microsoft Excel world, but you need both to be a fashion business person, right? Otherwise, I'll just be a fashion theorist sketching by myself without a business. This is what you need to survive. I have not answered the question. How do I manage cash flow? Poorly would be my answer. It's a long answer. I actually don't know how to answer this question. How far in the future are you thinking? I think when you first start out, you're kind of like, it's hand-to-hand combat. But the money that comes in funds the next drop, funds the research and development of the next drop. And your releases will be very far apart, like very far apart. But now 2.5 years in, almost 3 years, we are thinking a year in advance because we have enough money to develop, test, make samples, buy fabric very far in the future. But it also means that in a year's time, the releases are monthly. So you develop a cadence the more mature your business is. But when you first start out, it's like money in, money out. You're not really spending 3 drops, 4 drops, in our case, 12 drops in the future. You just don't have the capability to do that. Bigger brands, they're 2 years in the future. They're doing product development and testing 2-3 years in the future. It's just a different ballgame. When you first start by yourself and you're doing a solo business, you're doing everything yourself. So that means that you are wearing all the hats. You are designing stuff. You are doing all the liaising with suppliers by yourself. You are packing the stuff yourself. You are going to the post office by yourself. You're doing all the customer service. Top to bottom, you know everything. And I suggest that that's what you do when you first start out. It enables you to get a complete view of how things are produced, made, managed. And when you hire someone else to do that stuff, you know what you're talking about and you know what you're paying money for. So when you first start out, do everything, but I would start getting help as soon as those things get in the way of you doing your job. So I'm at that stage now. Like I've kind of built a small team around me to like, there's Courtney does the content, there's John that helps me like pack stuff. There's Alicia who does the production management. There's Long who does the production management as well. I've got a small team going, but it really took me 2.5 years to get the confidence and the wisdom really to get help around me. For 1.5 years, I was working by myself as a full-time job in addition to another full-time job. Ironically, I think that's the way to go. But your mileage may vary in terms of how frustrated you are willing to be. I think, you have to understand what your strengths are before you hire someone. What I really needed help with was liaising with factories. Because I was doing a full-time job, I couldn't answer emails until the end of the day, or maybe in a different time zone. And a lot of these things, especially when you make things locally, you needed to get zips from a factory, from the zip guy to the factory. You needed to get packaging like boxes, bags from A to B. And I just couldn't do that whilst I was doing a full-time job. So the first hire was a production manager who, physically helped me bring these things around, make phone calls, make sure things are on time. I didn't do that until like a year and a half in. Like I was kind of struggling doing that by myself. And it really got in the way of running a business in the end. And you need to get over your own kind of perfectionism. Like, I deliver bags in a certain way and someone else would do a poorer job of that. You need to get over that in order to like focus on the bigger problems, because there will be bigger problems. Right now, like a typical day is very, like it's painful, right? And I hate to be like a whinger and no one's going to be sympathetic to me, but it's very hard because I do a day job. I'm a doctor and I work a lot. And my work day in fashion starts at the end of the previous work day. So I'll come home, 7 p.m. and then I go start answering emails, customer service, stuff from the factory, start reading about fashion, new designs, start sketching in the iPad. And then I go to sleep. And then the day kind of rolls on for 2.5 years. So that's a typical day for me. I think design is very sexy as an idea, like, oh, I'm a designer, I live in a very abstract plane of existence where you're dealing with very out there ideas. And it is that sometimes, but a lot of it is just like chasing reality. Like you're dealing with the reality of stuff. It's like, oh, I would love a bomber jacket that's kind of like leathery, but not leathery. And it's like, oh, it looks cool. And then you realize that the fabric exists, but you only have 20 meters and you want to make 200 jackets. So you have to kind of change your idea based on what is available in real life. Or you have the fabric, but it costs too much to make. You can make it, but the factory is booked out until next year. Reality has a way of like screwing with your abstract ideas. And you have to live in reality. And that's what people don't realize. So when they actually feel and see product, it's almost a miracle that it's made, right? There's so many things that are in its way for it to exist. So I think people don't really realize that. My most valuable lesson, it's not really a lesson really, realization. Most important realization I've had is that you never know what's going to take off and what's going to be popular. And I always thought that things that are generic would have wider appeal because more people would kind of buy a hoodie or something. But the most specific things in the store right now are the things that I have slaved over. And I think they're very niche interests have been the most popular by far. And I think by being niche, it separates you from every other store. It separates you from every other, struggle brand who's trying to make stuff because it is so different and it's a point of difference.